Hello and welcome back. It's finally spring break time for me as a grad student, and I have nothing planned this next week. I just get designated time with me, myself, and the couch. I am going to be reading a ton of books, hopefully. If you haven't noticed, my new shelves, here they are. My fiance and I just moved into a new house, so you'll see a bunch of different locations in the video that you haven't seen before. I figured to make things interesting, I've always wanted to do this style of vlog, so I figured this would be the perfect time to do how many books can I read in 24 hours. I know that I'm not equipped to do a full 24-hour readathon with no breaks because I am the type of person that needs to be in bed by like 10:30. So we're not gonna do that. We're gonna do the thing where we set the timer for 24 hours and see how many books we can finish in that amount of time, whether that's actually sitting and reading them, listening to the audio and timing it there, or whatever we can get done. In this video, I know for sure we're gonna be finishing You Did Nothing Wrong by C.G. Drews. This book just came out. It's a horror book. It's an adult horror book. So it's C.G. Drews' first adult horror book. I've loved their other two books, which were Don't Let the Forest In and Hazelthorn. And this one, I am about like just over a third of the way through, and I really, really like it. The writing in it is top notch. I have come to expect certain things from C.G. Drews that they always deliver on, and it's amazing so far. Other books that I want to read, I have about 100 pages left of Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This is a sci-fi dystopian novel, and it's regarded as like a modern classic. Octavia E. Butler writes about like the 2020s, but this was written like 40 years ago, and I've been so enamored by the way that she has written about this time that seemed so far off and how much she got right, and so sad that she doesn't get to see her predictions come to fruition. So far, I really like the book. I think it's got a lot of important commentary and things to say, but I lost steam when I was reading it in February because I got busy with the move and everything. But I want to finish this off so that I can, finalize my thoughts on that. Another book that I want to read that I'm very thankful I got my hands on at my library is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. The movie just came out as of when I'm filming this video, but so many of my students love this book, and just so many people I know in general love it. And I kind of want to see what the hype is about at this point. And then books I don't have the physical copies of, I started listening to The Long Walk by Stephen King on audiobook, and I'm about 60% of the way through the book. I actually find this to be very interesting. I think the storyline alone is very compelling. I'm really enjoying the premise of it. There are still some aspects with Stephen King's writing that I'm not like in love with, but we'll get into that later. I have that as an option. I've been very compelled by that story. And then I just got word from my library that my hold for Abby Jimenez's new book, The Night We Met, is available. So after I read all this depressing literature, I have a palate cleanser. I don't know much about this one other than like, I think this girl rode home with a guy after a concert one night and didn't ride with this other dude, and then she starts dating the one dude. I don't know. Apparently this is like the second book in like the planned out trilogy that goes with Say You'll Remember Me, and I did not like Say You'll Remember Me, so I'm hoping that I like this one much more because I liked Abby Jimenez's Part of Your World little saga, but so far I didn't like the first one, so we'll see what happens. I'm going in open-minded. We got these books, we got one book on my Kindle, and we got audiobook options. So without further ado, let's dive in and get some reading done. reading on my Kindle for a lot of the day. For timestamp, we're at about like 3 hours of reading. I am almost done with You Did Nothing Wrong by C.G. Drews. This is C.G. Drews' adult horror debut. Hi, Merlin. I really am liking it. I'm very drawn in. It was one of those books where I just have forgotten the time when I was reading it because I get so sucked into the writing and the tension that is created through C.G. Drew's words. I I will tell you about the book first. I don't think we've talked about the synopsis of this book. So we have our main character, Elodie, and she is a young mom. She has a 6-year-old child by the name of Jude, and Jude is a child that needs more help than he's getting. Like he has it's implied that he is on the spectrum and needs additional support for his cognitive development, but his mom doesn't think he needs it. So it's about like the burnout that comes with motherhood, as well as like children who need additional help and what happens when they don't get the help that they need. But Jude and Elodie then get wrapped up in the situation where Elodie marries this American man. She's originally from Australia, and they move to the States, and they're adjusting to the States in this house. And it's like an old vintage Victorian style house that the husband is dead set on renovating and making their own space, but the house is giving off weird vibes to Jude. Like he's always saying like, it's scary here, I'm not happy, I don't like this. And Elodie is like tripping in this house all the time, except the husband, of course, is never experiencing any of these hallucinations or like weird parts of the house where it's like rotting or bleeding and all this other stuff. I seriously can't take him right now. He's being so cute. Oh my gosh. I have been listening to The Long Walk by Stephen King. I'm about 75% of the way done with this book. I think this book is really, really interesting. It has a lot of great commentary about class structures in society and meaning in life and what people will do when they're desperate. I think it's so scary when stories like this written so long ago still have themes that ring true to certain structures in today's society. If you don't know, The Long Walk was adapted into a film in 2025. So I was interested in reading the book so that I could maybe watch the film. I don't know. I don't do well with horror movies, but I love horror books, you know? But The Long Walk just centers on this group of like 100 boys in their teens, like 18 is the cap, and you can sign up for something called the Long Walk. And the Long Walk is this super long trail that these boys walk down where they have certain rules that they have to follow, and the prize at the end is like a promise to them where it's like wealth and anything you could need to survive. So it's usually these desperate people in desperate situations that sign up for this, and then it's broadcast across the United States and people make bets on it. There's lots of gambling. It's all about profit. There's a lot of like discussion about patriotism and how this is seen as like an honorable thing, but then after you're done with the long walk, people don't talk about you at all. And it's very much similar to like how veterans are treated in our society. It's interesting. And then I also did some digging and background information on this novel. And apparently, Stephen King was inspired by the tactics used to recruit people in the Vietnam War, as well as like the fitness programs that were implemented to youth in schools because of like trying to recruit people for the military. My goodness, you guys. It's a jungle gym. It's awesome, actually. I love it. But I'm probably going to finish Long Walk sometime tomorrow, and then I'm going to continue reading You Did Nothing Wrong, and I'll see how far we get tonight. Hello, it's time for an update. It's now day 3 of this vlog, and I have read many things since I last checked in. I didn't do much of an update yesterday once things got moving because I read a lot. I did a lot. I was actually very happy. Having time is crazy, right? You actually get things done. So where we're at with the timer, I'll include a screenshot down here. We're at about like halfway through on the dedicated reading time, and this includes like my audiobook time, everything there. I finally wrote down what I was feeling for You Did Nothing Wrong by C.G. Drews, which I'll go over. I also finished The Long Walk on audio by Stephen King and wrote down some stuff. And I absolutely devoured Abby Jimenez's new book, which was The Night We Met. Like, listened to it in a day sort of thing. So I didn't even get a chance to introduce what that book was about. I'm going to start with You Did Nothing Wrong because that was what we started the vlog with, and I finally have some fresh thoughts and feelings regarding it. I waited to put an official rating on this book because it was one of those things where it was so powerful and struck me in such a way where I needed to actually reflect on how I felt before I gave it a knee-jerk rating or anything like that. This book actually made me very emotional and very like unsettled in a way that required some profound reflection. I am going to give this book a 5 stars. It truly was unlike anything I'd read. And when you go into a book thinking that it's one thing and it completely destroys you in a way that you're not thinking at all, how can you not give it anything other than that? This book made me so enraptured with the way that it was written. I love C.G. Drew's writing. Like, their writing is something that I can just grasp onto because they write complex emotions in a way that I've never seen done before. They have their own masterclass version of how, like, I don't want to say how terrible people think and feel, but like how complex humans and people who maybe don't have the best of intentions for others are written. I know this book was very personal to C.G. Drews too, which was evident in the way that they, wrote Jude as a character and, Elodie's past, as well as the author's note that they left at the end of the book. I think all of the themes about like you did nothing wrong and how oftentimes children that face abuse for who they are or negligent parents are not the ones at fault. I think that this book has a lot of very complex feelings and attitudes towards motherhood in general, especially young single mothers who have burdens and expectations and trauma that they never got over as a child. We can definitely see that through Elodie's character. I think that it was really complex in the way that when we see Elodie's childhood, it makes sense why she is the way that she is, but we still don't condone what she's doing throughout the novel to her son Jude. The hardest takeaway from this novel for me was Elodie did nothing wrong as a child, but she did everything wrong as a mother and after what she experienced and the circumstances she was raised in. It's really hard when children are often blamed for the shortcoming and, often immaturity of parents. That's what got me really emotional during this novel, especially as someone who works in the field of education. And we often see children who are neglected or burdened by the expectations that are put on them by their parents to be something that they're not. Parents often try to fill the voids of what they didn't have growing up in ways that are not always healthy in children too. So I cried a lot actually during Elodie's backstory specifically, but I cried for Jude too. Jude did not deserve anything that happened in this novel. And I think C.G. Drews does a really, really good job of showing that while, yes, it is valid that Elodie is burnt out and frustrated at the fact that her child has more needs than she can give, it's not the child's fault that that's the case. It's not the child's fault that they are wired this way. I really liked this quote where, when we're talking about like Elodie's pregnancy, she often talks about how it's weird how she has like this app that will compare babies to like the sizes of fruit, where women are like, oh, my baby is the size of an apricot this month or something like that. But one sentence said, your baby is the size of all your sins. And I thought that was so interesting, but it also just reaffirms that even though we might take the faults of parents and bestow them upon their children, the children are not inherently born with the sins of their parents. Like, you are not born with your mother's immaturity. You were not born with the incapability of, emotional regulation because your parent has displayed those sorts of behaviors. I think that's so important for us to remember, especially as children who maybe didn't have the most positive childhood experience. Kind of going along with that sentiment of neurodiversity should not be seen or viewed as a moral failing of any kind. There's this quote that Elodie says it's her fault he's like this because he grew inside her where she'd packed down all of her vile secrets. Her rot and lies and misery, and his resentment of her is simply her hate for herself. Lines like that just get me. There's also a lot of interesting commentary about how Elodie is kind of like this anti-autism sentiment, and that's how we see her portrayed in the story. And while she's not trying to come at it from like a point of malice per se, it's written in a way where it's still detrimental to the neurodiverse community. Like we even have where she's talking about when Jude was playing at a family party, she's like, to them, he is the smudged pencil outline of a child, ready to be erased and replaced. He's not a real January. As saying like there's almost this inhumane quality to people who are born on the spectrum. I also really loved how Jude's neurodiversity and neurodiversity in general is often compared to the house, and how the house is also a representation of Elodie's own insecurities as a mother. But I specifically love the idea of, we revisit this idea of fixing and remodeling all the time in this novel. The idea of fixing this house that Bren is so stuck on, it parallels neurodiversity perfectly. So when C.G. Drews is talking about Bren when they say this, but he is too deep into this project of delusional happiness, remodeling the house, turning his new house, his new family, into a tomb to immortalize the legacy of what he lost. He's so stuck on the idea that, like, remodeling something to match the image of what you want it to be. And there's like this connection of he's always trying to update the wallpaper, but the rot and ugliness and the original like model of the house is still underneath. And I just think that that's such a perfect representation of what masking feels like in the neurodiverse community. Like you can put up this false appearance and this facade for everybody to see and everybody to remark on, and everybody remarks on what they can see, but they can't see what's underneath. And it's like you're almost forced to make it look a certain way, act a certain way, be a certain way, because that's what society expects and that's what society says. There's like this inherent feeling of like, if a house is not perfect, oh, when are you going to update it to make it look a certain way? I think Bren's character is so interesting in this novel because he not only wants to, reshape and reframe Jude's neurodivergent behavior, but he also wants to remodel Elodie in a manner to make her like the perfect wife to fit the version that he's created in his head of what she is, because he has this infatuation with her that runs so deep. And it's so interesting because that's how Elodie wanted to mold Jude into how society viewed the perfect child, but she saw him as perfect in the way that he was. I just this novel has so many layers of complexity that I think you could write many papers analyzing on, and I like am resisting the urge to go and drop everything and do that right now. But I just think in the writing is also just so beautiful in the way that it constructs a picture. Like here are some of the quotes that like stuck out to me in the beginning. C.G. Drews knows how to say things without like just spelling it out. She is meticulous about her demure facade, though never slipping up to show the cavernous gouge in her chest where anxiety festers like toxic spillage, images flashing through in a curated slideshow from hell. Like, what a way to write insecurities. What a way to write brokenness within a person without saying it. And then also, I really loved this quote, which kind of gets at the fact that Elodie is a very young mother, and we often sometimes forget that until it's revisited in the novel again. But we have, nights like these remind her that she should be looking through the underside of shot glasses instead of knowing tomorrow's hangover will be thanks to her child's midnight hysterics.
It's just so interesting. I just I loved this novel, and I know right now it's getting a lot of mixed reviews and a lot of frankly concern regarding it, but I really liked it. Like, I've not stopped thinking about it. Like, even while I was reading other books, I kept coming back to this idea of it. And maybe it's just because I was a child with a neurodiversity when I was younger. I have diagnosed ADHD now, but as a child, I had that, and I was always expected to mask and act in a certain way. And maybe this book just filled a part of me that I didn't know it needed to be full, you know? It kind of was the missing puzzle piece in literature that I needed for a while. This book was great. Um, Read trigger warnings before you go into it, but I definitely think this is a work of art, truthfully. I feel like I could make a whole hour-long video just dissecting the symbolism and themes, and you did nothing wrong, but nobody has time for this right now. So I am going to pivot into talking about The Long Walk by Stephen King. To preface, this is only the second Stephen King novel I've ever read. I read Misery by him, and I was not a super big fan of that one. I really like the movie of Misery, but being in Paul Sheldon's head was just insufferable, truthfully. So I went into The Long Walk with curiosity for the film adaptation that just came out and hope that it was a better psychological thriller. I thought it was good. I thought it was solid overall. I would have given this book like 4 stars, maybe 3.5. It was a really interesting read, and it made me reflect a lot on our society now, which any dystopian style literature will hopefully make you do. But I think the most interesting part of this book was like the exploration of fanaticism. The themes that are strongest in this novel are the fanaticism and the almost gamification, and how that almost always gets pulled back to people in desperate situations. It also was really interesting in the glorifying of the military, how there's like this patriotism and weird, like, honor that's bestowed upon people just because they're in the military. And there's like this inherent goodness or inherent morality that is attached to it. Very interesting stuff. One of the scenes that stuck out to me the most, kind of talking about this fanaticism, like this feral fanaticism that we even still see in fan culture today. But Garrity, the main character, was like, they, being the people watching The Long Walk, will jar my own shit and sell it as a souvenir. And one, that's interesting because it not only speaks to like the rabid fan culture, but then I also think that it kind of talks to how everything comes back to profit. Like, of course, they're going to sell that and make money from it. Like, we think of like the Eras Tour tickets and how people were scalping online. Like, they buy the tickets and then they would upsell them by a lot because they know these people who are desperate to feel connection or, want money connected to something will do it. And I just think that's so interesting. Honestly, this book was like very Hunger Games adjacent for being written like well before it. Like, the not only the idea of like the gamification and like how Hunger Games has like the sponsors and things like that, but also the living and carrying on the trauma. Like, the is it worth it to see what's on the other side of this? Is it going to be worth it living with what I know now? The fact that the Long Walk itself annually generates over $1 billion in profit from gambling bets alone is crazy. And I just think of like how the Hunger Games has like tons of money going into sponsorships and deals and stuff when that money could be redistributed to help the people that are in need and need the money in these situations in the first place. I also think it's super unsettling how much this parallels our present day with the treatment of people in poverty or the preying on the uneducated and the restriction of education. But it's also paralleling America's fascination with the military fortitude, strength, and greatness that comes with that badge of honor. I just really thought that this was an interesting book. It definitely made me think a lot. I think some of the shortcomings of the book definitely were it was clearly written in a not modern time with the way that Stephen King talks about women in particular. I really don't like the over sexualization, and I get it. We're in a 16-year-old boy's head. But there is no way in like the span of 5 days that this dude is, I don't know. And reading it as an adult woman just made me feel very uncomfortable. Like that alone, I'm like, come on. Or the way he would describe women was always like about their physical appearance and like their breasts, their butt, what they were wearing. I grew tired of it. It rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't enjoy that. I also think that, queerness and being a person of color at this time was different, obviously, but this book, you know, it doesn't talk about it in the best way. And I get it, it's a product of its time, but at the same time, I have to say it because it made me uncomfortable. I think this book has a lot of interesting conversations. I also wrote down like a banger title of an essay that I came up with, which I might end up actually writing this and seeing where it goes from here. But I have Chasing Wealth, Glory, and the American Dream: What the Long Walk Tells Us About the Dangers of Human Desperation. Like, don't I just sound like a pretentious English major when I say that? I really liked both of the books. I obviously loved one and thought the other one was good. Now let's jump into The Night We Met by Abby Jimenez. This is Abby Jimenez's new adult romance book. This is the second book in like her Say You'll Remember Me series or trilogy, and I read Say You'll Remember Me last year and it made my worst books of 2025 list. I did not enjoy it very much. So going into this book, I felt very skeptical because I've always really enjoyed the Abby Jimenez books that I've read. I at least read like the Part of Your World trilogy. I didn't love the Happy Ever After playlist, and I didn't like Say You'll Remember Me. But when you have like the 3 books that are like all 5-star books for me, I have high expectations for her, and everybody loves her writing for a reason. The Night We Met follows one of the friends in Xavier that was the love interest in the first book, follows someone in his friend group now. So like the main guy in this book is named Chris, and then he sort of hits it off with this girl named Larissa, who is a waitress at the local restaurant that they go to pretty often. However, the catch is that Larissa is actually dating one of the other friends, Mike, because the night after a concert, she had the choice of either going home with Chris for a ride or Mike. And she chose Mike because Mike was a bit more outgoing and like Chris seemed very standoffish. Throughout the course of the novel, she learns that their first time meeting was actually not representative of how he was. The primary relationship is supposed to be Chris and Larissa. However, Mike is Larissa's boyfriend throughout the book. So Chris has all of this guilt about having feelings for Larissa because they have a lot in common. They're finding out more about each other. And Mike is very fragile at the moment too. Like I think Mike's story was very interesting and it was done with like a lot of care at the same time. I really liked it. We're back on the Abby Jimenez train. It was very funny, heartfelt, and it went by so quickly at the same time. I think the way for me to consume Abby Jimenez books is by audio because then I can just absorb it all. It goes by quickly. I have a much better time. I've like read 2 of them physically and they were not the ones that I enjoyed as much, so I don't know why that is, but I really enjoyed this one. I specifically loved our main character Larissa because she is the type of girl where she grits her teeth and gets through life. She has a tenacity to make things happen, especially because she is like drowning in debt that wasn't even her fault. She is burdened by the mistakes of her 2 parents, and she takes on all of their problems basically because she has to. So her whole life has been like survive, 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 get to the next thing, get this job, get that job, make money to survive, but she's not living life. Whereas Chris has had like this very lonely existence because his parents were older when he was born and they passed away, so he's kind of dealing with the grief of not having that familial connection, and all of his relationships come from the friendships and like found family that he's kind of built in his life. So he really values having friendships and he's very intentional and caring, and he would be like the perfect boyfriend essentially, but he's just a little bit more on the reserve side. This book also has really great commentary on the fact of we judge people based on like what their occupation or job is, and we ascribe intelligence and importance based on that role. And I am so sick of this like feeling that just because you're a certain like major in college or you have a certain job that you're inherently higher on the social totem pole, you know? Like Chris is a pharmacist and Larissa is a waitress, but she never graduated high school because she had to drop out because of the mismanagement of money that her parents had done. But you can clearly see that she's very intelligent, very resourceful. But she has the idea that because Chris was a pharmacist, she thought that he was too good for her. And a lot of people are kind of like, Chris, you've got all of this. Like, why don't you have a girl? Like, you should have a girl because you have all these things. And it was interesting because I think Abby Jimenez writes about it in a delicate way where she's talking about like the importance of like blue collar work and everything and how sometimes people will look down on others because of that, but there are so many career paths and options, and our being is not tied to our career, you know? I've been thinking about that a lot lately, so I'm really glad that this book kind of touched on that. I've been taking a career development class because that's one of the required things for my master's degree, and I'm starting to see it everywhere now, and it's really interesting, especially as someone who was an English major at a primarily STEM school. I got a lot of comments about my own intelligence just because of that. It hit home, and she wrote it in a way where I was like, yep, that's how it feels. And often, like, I caught myself with my own biases too when I was reading the book because at first I was like, how would these two ever have anything in common? But I was so wrong, and I was so glad that I was wrong because I love Larissa. She is such a gem of a main character, and you can tell that she's been through so much, but she has had to grow a lot. And Chris kind of helps her grow and is that safety net for her too. It's just so beautiful. You should go read the book. It's really fun. And like you don't have to read Say You'll Remember Me in order to enjoy this one. You'll understand like the cameos a bit more because Abby Jimenez does that in like all of her books. But this one was great and I highly recommend it. Now that we've gotten through all of the stuff that I've been reading, I have finished 3 books so far since starting this vlog, so we're doing great. I think the next plan of attack is to do Parable of the Sower. I only have like I think like 60 pages left of this book, so I could probably knock that out in one sitting. As for the rest of the day, it's really gorgeous outside right now. It's cold but very sunny, which is one of my favorite temperatures and weather setups. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on a little jacket and maybe go for a walk after I finish this book. There's a like thrift store that's within walking distance, so I've been wanting to check that out, as well as there's a used bookstore that's within walking distance, so maybe I'll put on an audiobook and go from there. I don't have an audio for the other 2 books that I was planning on finishing, so maybe I'll pick something else because the wait for this is so long, and then this is only available on Audible, which sucks. So very upset about that. But we'll finish Parable of the Sower. I'll come back with thoughts, and I'll take you on the rest of the adventure for today. All right, time for yet another check-in. I feel like I haven't checked in a minute, but we've got some things that we need to go over. I got some stuff done. So this angle's fun, right? I'm trying to see how the light works at night in here. Anyways, I finished Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This book has a lot of interesting things to say about like the power of religion, the power of like humanity in surviving even when things are stacked up against. Like, can we trust one another? All these sorts of things. There's a lot of discussion about like human nature and if humans are inherently good or do they succumb to the terrible things that they're surrounded by. I really liked that discussion, and that ties in with like the religious themes and everything in this book too. And I also really love Lauren's character with the like super feeling and the empathy, and how it's really hard to have empathy in a world that is constantly beating you down and everything. The most powerful things, however, in this book that represents how times have changed but are slowly becoming a reality is the ability to read is seen as something that's like really, really great and sought after. Whereas, you know, the norm is not reading and literacy crisis. Most people are illiterate and can't read. And since we're in our own literacy crisis, I think this book is really important to read. So we see the parallels between what we're facing now and what could happen in the future. Yeah, I think all the themes of survival were especially really gripping in this. The story itself is much more like character driven, where it's like, what do the characters do when the odds are stacked against them and they're dropped in this world that clearly doesn't have a way to win? And what kind of meaning can you make out of that? There's like a lot of existential themes, which I love as well. I am a big fan of existential philosophy, so seeing some of that kind of played out is interesting. I don't know if I'll continue with the second book or not. I'm really glad that I finally read this one after it's been on my shelf for a while, so I'll take a win where I can get it. Other items of note, I was out and about meeting up with my mom for a little fun day out today, and we went to a really awesome bookstore. So I got a few items while I was out, and then I also saw a really interesting nonfiction book that I wanted to start reading. So I'll briefly talk about that because I don't think I'm going to finish that in the span of this video. But this book is called Doppelganger and is by Naomi Klein. Apparently, it's this woman has someone who kind of looks like her. They've talked about like similar things in politics before, but this other Naomi, Naomi number two or whatever on the internet, is getting mistaken for her, and the Naomi number two is starting to fall down like the alt-right wing rabbit hole conspiracy theory sort of stuff. So it's talking a lot about like internet identity, what it means to be mistaken for someone else, and like how the internet has made like identification difficult. It's really interesting so far. Like, it's really well written and well researched, and I've actually laughed a few times because the writer's a little humorous too. I'm only about like 15 to 20% of the way through so far, but I was enjoying it quite a bit. Other things, I got two books while I was at the bookstore today. First was Cultish by Amanda Montell. This was one of my favorite books of 2024, and I love the cover with all the colors and everything. Amazing. Amanda Montell is she's like a podcaster but also a social psychologist and linguist, and she has a lot of interesting books that relate to how like words connect to different things in our society. And cultish is how certain cults use language and linguistic techniques to get people to join their ranks. It's a really interesting book. It's like one of my favorite nonfiction books, so it'd been on my list for a while to get, and I finally got one there. The other book I got is more of a new release book, but it's on my 20 books to read this year list, and I had it checked out from the library once, only read about like 30 pages, and then I had to send it back. So I was like, okay, the amount of time I want to spend with this book is not going to be enough. So I should just buy it because there were people waiting anyways, and it's like several months wait back on the library now. But that is Girl on Girl: How Pop Culture Turned a Generation of Women Against Themselves by Sophie Gilbert. This book is going to be an exploration of how women are often pitted against each other instead of recognizing that it's a system problem from the ground up. So I think this will be a really, really good nonfiction to read. nonfiction read, and I'm excited to get to it. So I got those two today. Right, and the final part for this segment is, what do we read next? I feel like I've got two viable options. I can go with I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman, or we could finally start Project Hail Mary, which would also be really fun. I'm borrowing this book from my school's library, but I know there are a lot of kids that want to read it, so I'm trying not to hold on to this one too long. I'm going to read Project Hail Mary next. I will update you once we dive into it. It is officially the last day of spring break for me, which means it's the last day of this little, like, how much can I read in 24 hours challenge that I've been doing. I have about 4 hours left overall. I have an update on Project Hail Mary. So I'm about 100 pages in. I read some of this yesterday and the day before. Not too far in yet. So far, I think it's going okay. If you don't know the premise of Project Hail Mary, it's coming out as a movie as well. It's already out. But we follow a scientist who gets sent on this mission, and he wakes up with amnesia. He's not sure why he was sent here. He can't remember anything about himself. So you're kind of discovering the mystery as the protagonist is, in which sounds like an interesting premise. I'll give it that. However, I am having a little bit of a hard time connecting with the writing style. It's pretty much like short and to the point, but it is also like, I don't think the character is really that quippy or funny. It's more just like a, okay, yeah, you could say that. This is also objectively ridiculous because this is fiction, but the most unbelievable part of this all is not like the science fiction aspects, it's the aspect of like the way that he's teaching. As someone who works in education, I have already, like, I'm only 100 pages in, and there's already like three things where I'm like, I don't think you're supposed to do that. Which I can suspend my disbelief, but it's just funny. So I'm curious to see how it continues while we progress through the story. So this book is just okay so far. I'm still gonna read it and, give my full review, but like a book that's 500 pages that I'm just like, I'll take my time with it. I realized I never filmed an outro for this video, so this is gonna be my half-baked attempt at it, and Aowen is here to help me out. I filmed this video like 2 months ago and just got so swept up in life that I never finished editing it until now. So yay, it's getting up finally after all this time. But overall, I read a lot. April was the month that I ended up reading the most out of anything, and I'm very happy with that. Fun fact, I didn't finish Project Hail Mary, even though I got like 200 pages into it. I put it down and I was like, oh, I should get the audiobook, and then realized that the only way to get it is on Audible, and I refuse. Other than that, I still, to this day, love You Did Nothing Wrong so much, and I'm so glad that I read it in this vlog and got to capture all of my thoughts. But that's all I have. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. This was my one of my first big attempts at making a vlog, so it's more just about having fun and cataloging things when I have the time to. But I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel, leave a comment of what your favorite book is that you've read so far this year, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!